G Master quality and in some ways better, but significantly cheaper, and an f1.2 great googly moogly. Well, boys and girls, down in Las Vegas, Nevada last week at the NAB conference, the National Association of Broadcasters, Viltrox announced their second lens in their flagship series. They're calling this the Lab series, and it's meant to compete with the best of the best, and it certainly does that. Last year, they announced a 135 f1.8. This is for the Nikon Z mount. It's for my Z6 III that I recently purchased. I'm supposed to say Z because I am from Canada, but it ruins the rhymes in my alphabet. Anyway, I tested the daylights out of this for the Z mount and also for the E mount, and it actually stacked up very, very well against the Sony G Master f1.8 135. It beat it in most of the ways that counted for me. So I, along with a whole lot of other people, were very excited when they announced a 35mm f1.2 in this series. Video shooters can rejoice, and also people who like photography at the 35mm focal length, but I really love to shoot video, and I often like to shoot at 35mm, and now I have a 1.2 that I can use. And of course, disclosures, Viltrox did send me this lens at no cost to myself for the purpose of this review. That is the case with most of the lenses I review on the channel, but let that bias factor in where it may. I will just show you the tests. I will compare it to the Sony G Master, and you can see for yourself. Let's take a look at this lens in action here in the studio, and look at a 1.2. The background is obliterated back there. Let me just show you what an f1.8 looks like. My Sony 35 f1.8 compared to that Viltrox 1.2. So if you really want that background separation, you want things to turn to mush behind there, focus on the old moneymaker, your handsome mug, then boy oh boy, the Viltrox 1.2 is the way to go. And for comparison, this is the Viltrox at 1.2 versus the G Master now at f1.4. And if we stop the Viltrox to 1.4 and compare it to the Sony lens, that is how they look side by side. Honestly, I would take either image any day of the week, especially with that model, you know what I'm saying? Let's talk about the build quality of this Viltrox lens, and I don't say this lightly, but I believe this is the best built lens that I have ever handled. It is just so premium feeling. You won't believe it until you actually feel it. It is not a small, lightweight lens. That is one of the drawbacks, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but the aperture ring feels so good, the focus ring turns so smoothly, and the texture on the lens itself is just nice and smooth and premium. I just really love the build quality of this lens. You have two programmable buttons on the side, an autofocus to manual focus switch, and a switch to turn the clicks on or off your aperture ring. It has a 77mm filter thread and a 34cm minimum focus distance. There's a rubber gasket on the back for weather sealing and a USB-C port so that you can update your lens from a convenient little app that connects Bluetooth to your lens. And just like the previously released 135, it has a little LCD screen that lights up when you use it, so that is how you see your aperture. There are no notches or writing on the actual lens itself like you would see with a more traditional lens. They have gone a little more high-tech over there at Viltrox, and a lot of people really love that. Some people may not love that. I am on the fence. Sometimes I really miss the notches. Other times I do like that little screen, especially if I'm trying to do nighttime photography. I can see what is happening, and also it gives you your focus distance right there on the screen. And in the little app that I mentioned, you can actually change elements of the screen. Like I have it boot up to say, Mark is hot, because why not? It's time to tell the truth to the people. But you can see me moving the aperture here on the screen, and also now if I adjust my focus. So depending on who you are, you may love that, you may hate that. that is a personal choice. Also comes with a very sturdy pedal lens hood, and the lens hood can actually just lie flat there if you want to put your camera down that way and have some kid kick it over while he's looking for his ice cream cone. Now, one of the compromises to get a 1.2 lens of this quality is, of course, size. Here it is compared to the Sony 35 1.4. So 1.4 versus 1.2, but the Sony is certainly noticeably smaller and also lighter. Let's just do it here on the scale. The Viltrox is 922 grams without the caps, and the Sony is 519 grams. So not quite half the weight, but pretty close to half the weight. Now, you do get a 1.2, like I said. Let me see, this is my 35 1.8 here from Sony, and you see how much bigger the Sony is, the 35 G Master, compared to its little 35 1.8. So it may not seem like much to be lowering the aperture from 1.8 to 1.4, but it requires a lot more glass, and if you're gonna lower it still to 1.2, you're going to have to put up with some size. And Sony has been the master of making small lenses for quite a while. Not a surprise to me that this Viltrox is so much bigger than the Sony, but that is something you do have to deal with. I will say I don't think it looks out of place at all on my Sony a7R5. I carried this around for more than a week. No problem for me at all, but I am a pretty burly man after all. But still, I think it is quite comfortable. I like the way it balances. It's not the smallest lens I've ever had on the camera, but I don't really think that that's a deal breaker for me. When it comes to sharpness, I expected this lens to be sharp, and it is. All of the Viltrox lenses that are coming out, even their lowest price line, the Air series, are extremely sharp, so this one is no exception. Even at f1.2, you get a very sharp image, and it is more than usable at 1.2, which is great. If you're going to get this amount of glass and a bigger, heavier lens, then you're going to want to be able to use it at 1.2, and you certainly can do that. It actually competes decently with the G Master at 1.4 when you have the Viltrox at 1.2. The Sony G Master is noticeably sharper at 1.4 versus the 1.2, but you would expect that. When you put the Viltrox lens at 1.4, I honestly cannot pick between the two as to which one is sharper. In some photos, it seems like the Viltrox is sharper. In other photos, it seems like the Sony lens is sharper. And when you're having that type of discussion with this magnificent 35 GM lens, which everybody raves about when it comes to sharpness, then Viltrox is in very good company. Now, something I didn't expect is the Viltrox actually seems a little sharper in the corners than the Sony G Master lens. So in the middle at 1.4, it is virtually identical, and in the corners, it is a little bit better. So that is a very impressive showing. With autofocus, we have more great news here. Fantastic at autofocusing, whether you're tracking your subject, whether it's AFS, whether it's AFC, it is just snappy, reliable, almost instantaneous with no fluttering whatsoever. And of course, at f1.2, you will be able to focus in very low light situations. The only time that I would say the G Master would beat the Viltrox lens when it comes to focus is tracking fast moving subjects. You will always find the first party lenses for Sony to have a higher hit rate when it comes to fast moving subjects. So if you wanted to shoot sports with your 35mm lens, then I would suggest you get the Sony G Master versus the Viltrox. Now, if it's not sports, then you really won't find any difference in the autofocus of the two lenses because the Viltrox holds up mightily. While focus is amazing, focus breathing is present on both of these lenses. In fact, the Viltrox lens has a little less focus breathing than the Sony G Master if you aren't using focus breathing compensation in a Sony. Now, the win here for the Sony is because almost all of the new Sony cameras have focus breathing compensation. So if you have one of the newer generation Sony cameras, then you can just eliminate focus breathing entirely with this G Master lens. However, if you have a camera that doesn't have focus breathing compensation, then you will be better off with the Viltrox. When it comes to chromatic aberration, Viltrox has done a wonderful job here with both lateral and longitudinal chromatic aberration. You really have to pixel peep to find any kind of lateral chromatic aberration at all. And when it comes to the LOCA, the longitudinal chromatic aberration, that is the color fringing you will see on the areas of the foreground and the background that are out of focus. Again, a wonderful job of suppression of the aberration here. It does a better job than the G Master, and the G Master was pretty good at it. So if you are pixel peeping, then you will see that there is a little less color on the Viltrox lens compared to the impressive G Master. Bokeh and the Bokeh balls are fantastic. Out-of-focus backgrounds are so creamy and smooth. When you compare it to the Sony G Master, you will see how pleasant both of the out-of-focus areas are. And of course, the Viltrox can get you a little more background separation due to that 1.2. When you have such a low aperture lens, of course, you're going to want to stop it down, so those background areas need to be nice and smooth. This one, like butter. Bokeh ball, so nice, clean and round, no haloing, no ugly color fringing or weird membrane around those nice shaped orbs. There's some cat's eyes staring in at those beautiful globs right there, but I absolutely love the way that Viltrox is rendering the bokeh balls on almost all of their new lenses. This next category is where you can tell this is a very premium lens for Viltrox. The coatings that they use on this glass are excellent. The flare resistance and the glaring resistance are just wonderful on this Viltrox lens. They're just as good as the Sony, and the Sony does a really great job as well of keeping flares and glares away from your fancy photos. When it comes to Sunstars, this is a 35mm focal length, so you're probably not going to get amazing Sunstars. Both of them have Sunstars, and they are okay, but I certainly wouldn't buy each lens looking for the ultimate in Sunstars. You will certainly see some vignetting on this lens at f1.2, probably all the way to about f2, and that is to be expected. There will be Lightroom profiles where you can correct that with one click of a button, and also correcting vignetting is not very tricky in almost any software. Now, distortion, there is not much distortion on this lens either. Coming straight out without any corrections, it is actually quite a usable image. But if you look closely, you will see a little bit of that mustache distortion, and once again, there will be a profile to correct all of that. When it comes to price, I think the Viltrox lens is priced pretty fairly given what you are getting here, and I do believe they're running a promotion on the launch of this video, so depending on when you're watching it, if I have a coupon code, I will put it down below in the description, but the full retail price will be $999, so I think it will be $950 with the coupon that they're offering at the beginning. And the Sony G Master, the 1.4, that is a $1,400 USD lens. Now, while that is a significant cost savings, there are still reasons why some people will want to opt for the Sony GM. Of course, the first one is size and weight. That's pretty obvious. You would much rather carry around a smaller, lighter lens if you have to carry something around all day. If it's up on a tripod, no big deal. But if you're running around all day long in the Sahara, then this is probably the one you'd want. The Sony lens, of course, has focus breathing compensation in compatible Sony bodies, and it features no limits to its frames per second. So if you have a fancy A9 III, you want to shoot 120 frames per second, you can't do it with the Viltrox lens. It is capped at 15 frames per second, whereas the Sony G Master, that can go all the way up there. You will also notice better stabilization when you use the Sony 35mm, while neither lens has optical stabilization. First-party Sony lenses play better with the electronic stabilization that is in many of the Sony bodies. So if you are trying to use this for handheld work and you have the active stabilization turned on your Sony camera, then you will notice smoother footage with the G Master. And lastly, as mentioned, if you are tracking very fast moving subjects, you are going to get a higher hit rate on a first-party Sony lens. Now, that being said, in most ways that I use a 35mm, the Viltrox is just as good as the G Master for all of the things I need it for, and it goes to f1.2, and it is $400 cheaper. So I think this presents a very compelling value for a whole lot of people. What about you? Let me know down below. Would this sway you away from a Sony 35mm G Master? If not, let me know the reasons and we'll have a nice little discussion about it. Thanks for watching this. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.